In this video, we're going to be taking our steering from this to this. All for under 150 bucks. And that's installing this into your steering column. So this is a steering quickener. It goes in your column, and there's a few different options that you get when you purchase one of these. So you can get different ratios. So this is a 1.5 to 1. You can also get a 2.0 to 1. And possibly higher if you actually wanted to, but then it's going to be a little bit too responsive and it's going to be really twitchy at any higher speeds. So the way it works is this is the steering wheel side, and as I rotate it, since mine is a 1.5 to 1, every one full rotation of this means 1.5 rotations on this side. So clearly there is some more fabrication involved in this because you have to cut your steering column in half and then weld in this piece in the middle. Also, once you do it, you will have a little bit more of a harder steering feel than it because you're doing 1.5 times more work. But to me, it really is worth it because yes, there'll be a little bit more steering effort, but it'll be so much easier to actually control the car once it starts sliding and actually initiate that slide without having to go fully to 90 degrees or even 180 degrees for some of the slower turns. So one thing that I would recommend, since this is an off-road only mod, is buy a second column. That way, if you're not comfortable fully installing it, in case you mess it up, you don't take your car off the road. And columns aren't really that hard to swap, so you can just bring the column with the quickener into like the racetrack or something like that, throw it in real quick in the parking lot, and then swap it out before you leave. That way, if you're driving there on it, you don't have to worry about anything going wrong with it or something like that, just in case. So once you actually get your steering column out of the car, you're going to want to separate the two pieces. So you have the inner part that actually spins with the steering wheel and goes down to the knuckle, and then you have the outer part that takes the ignition and all the stop controls and actually mounts it to the car. Now, to actually remove the two pieces, you have a snap ring at the top. Once you remove that, you just have to lightly tap on it a few times and the two pieces will come apart. So once you get those two pieces apart, next thing to do is to figure out exactly how long the quickener is when you throw on the actual attachment pieces. So these are the pieces that you actually need to buy with the quickener that don't come with it, and you're going to be welding these to the actual column to be able to attach the steering quickener. There's a link to everything in the description in case you want to actually do this on your car, and you'll always be able to see what you need in case you want to do it in the future. So I'm going to install these on there and measure it and figure out exactly how long it is, and then mark it up on the old column and figure out where I need to cut. So the next thing, I just figured out exactly where I want to mount it, which I'm going to go in the lower portion of the column. As you can see, it's pretty close to the same circumference as these attachment pieces that I'm going to be welding on. And I'll be able to keep some of this collapsibility of the original column, so that'll be good. But the only issue with it is this portion is only 8 inches and the entire steering quickener is about 10 with the attachment pieces installed. So I'm gonna have to take about 1 inch off from each side. Alright, now that I got these two pieces cut and trimmed, I'm actually ready to cut the column. So I already made my marks, and I know I need to be cutting on the inside of my marks to the portion that I'm not going to be using, and I'm going to be adding that piece in. So to make these cuts, I am going to be using my chop saw, which I would definitely recommend if you're going to be doing this, because you want to have a pretty precise, clean, straight cut. If you do it with an angle grinder or something like that, you're going to wobble a little bit, and it's just going to make it more difficult to get it straight when you're actually welding it together. And as always, if you're using a chop saw, I'd recommend using like a speed square or something like that. Putting it against the blade and making sure that the backing plate that your part is actually going to lock into is lined up with it. Alright, got both of them cut. Now I just need to clean up the edges and bevel them a little bit, and should be good to start mocking up for welding. Alright, so now we're actually ready to start tacking this into place. So I've got a piece of angle iron laid out as kind of a jig. That way, once you lay both the round pieces in there, they kind of self-center on each other, and then it's going to help get it perfectly straight as possible. On this end, I've got a magnet propping up the smaller spline end. That way it kind of stays level with the rest of it. Now I'm just gonna go slowly around it and tack it into place. That way if it is crooked or I get any warping, I can just break those tacks and I can redo it. I definitely wouldn't recommend this if you're not a good welder, or if you don't trust your welding abilities, or if you have a crappy welder. You definitely want good penetration, good welds on this, because it is your steering shaft. It's not going to see too much stress, but you definitely don't want to weld it with some crappy flux core Chicago electric welder that's not going to be able to penetrate how thick this stuff is. So definitely make sure you're a good welder, or if you're not confident in your abilities, just take it to a professional and have them weld it. But I'm ready to actually start tagging it, so I'm going to get my TIG out. Okay, just finished up tacking the first one, and whenever you want to check this, I would definitely throw the Quickener into like a vise or something like that, so that way it's held straight, and then just rotate the other end so you can actually see how straight this end is. So as you can probably tell, it's not perfectly straight. It's not too bad though. I'm definitely going to just leave it how it is for now with just the tacks. That way once I get it fully done, before I weld it up completely, I'll know for sure if it binds or anything like that, if I have to fix it. But time to move on to the next one. Okay, so I got both sides tacked on. This side has me a little bit worried just because it moves a little bit from left to right as you rotate it. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to cause binding issues, but we'll see once I get it fully together if I need to break those tacks and redo it. Anyway, on to the next part. So I have to section out the outer part of the column for the Quickener, and how I want to do that is take a section out about that big so that it will slide up and the outer part of the column will cover the Quickener and it'll be snug to here, so you can use like silicone or like masking tape or something to fill in the gap. But you want it snug on there so it actually holds it a little bit in place. So now I'm just going to mark exactly where I need to cut this and start with the lower section and then move my way to the upper section. Alright, got the lower half done. Now I just need to mark and then trim the upper half, and then I can actually add like some masking tape so it snugs up to the actual Quickener. And then I can weld on the mount that I made for the Quickener to actually bolt to so it doesn't spin. Okay, so I got the top piece done. As you can see, I made it a little bit too short. I would definitely recommend measuring a little bit better than I did and going all the way to the edge of the steering Quickener. That way it really can snug up against it. But not really a big deal because I'm going to permanently mount it, and I've got my 1/8 inch plate steel that I just put a 90 in, and I notched it for the tube of the actual steering column. So it's just going to weld on there, and 2 holes to actually bolt it up to. So I'm just going to tack that on real quick, mount it up, and then I'm going to throw this in the car since that's really the only way that I can tell if this is binding. Once I get it in the car and if everything's good, I'll pull it out, fully weld up those seams in there, and then permanently mount this. Alright, so I just stuffed it in the car, and I wanted to see if there was any binding or any issues like that, and no binding, so it rotated the wheels pretty easily, so no issues there with any weird orbital pattern, like when it rotates or anything like that. So now I just have to disassemble it and fully weld up both the ends and this mount, and then it'll be good to actually take off the old ignition and throw on all the stock controls and the ignition from the column that actually is in the car. Alright, so that's the last bit of welding that we had to do. Just gotta let it cool. Next step, I'm going to be putting masking tape on the edges of the actual Quickener. That way, these outside pieces of the column can actually snug up to it, and it'll hold it a little bit more firm. But they're already pretty close as it is, so it won't be too much. You can silicone them, like I said earlier, but I'm just gonna use masking tape to kind of just take up a little bit of that room. That way it's easy to remove later on. So got the masking tape on, both sides are snugged up, mount's good and strong, there's no binding issues with the actual shaft, so that's good. So next step, I got to remove the ignition from here because this isn't the column that I will be using, and this one is. So I got to remove the ignition and move over the stall controls and all that. Now to remove the ignition on a Subaru, it's a little bit different because they don't put normal bolts in here, because the ones that they put in there, as you can see, have no head on them. And that's so if someone breaks into your car, they can't just switch out your ignition switch and then steal your car that way. But they're pretty easy to remove. If you use a drill, put a little hole in it, and then you can just use like a little chisel or a punch to kind of rotate them around, because they're not really torqued very much. So that's the next step, get that off and then switch over all the controls. All right, we got the stall controls on, the hub for the steering wheel. Everything's good and tight. It should be good to actually throw in the car now. So, got in the car, as you can see, but as you can probably tell, it's definitely been a while. So my hair grew quite a bit. I've got some facial hair now, so it's been a couple weeks. So I got in the car that night after I finished working it with the last clip. But then after that, the next couple of days was way too busy, and then Hurricane Florence happened and had to leave, a whole bunch of stupid stuff, but ended up finally coming back and getting a chance to work on the car. So I'm going to take it for its first test drive, which is what I'm doing now, to see what kind of a difference that this steering column quickener actually made in the car. So one of the biggest issues that you run into if you increase the ratio of the rack too much is drivability at higher speeds. So whether you're racing at higher speeds or you're just driving at highway speeds, you don't want to increase it so much to where you're just turning the steering wheel a little bit and it's sending you over like a whole lane. That can be really dangerous racing, and especially well on the highway. You just all of a sudden space for a second and you end up in the next person's lane. So that's really what I'm looking for right now. It's just any drivability concerns that I may have, and to show you guys actually how quick the ratio is and what kind of a difference that makes with the steering input and actually where the car is on the road. So I'll switch views so you can actually see that. So going like 55, 60 miles an hour right now, and you can see just slight movements in the steering wheel really makes a big difference. So definitely going to make a huge difference when I'm actually rally crossing and then eventually stage rally, just with how much easier it's going to be to correct slides, initiate slides, do some like Scandinavian flicks and stuff like that. So definitely looking forward to it. Improvement is great. So as you can see from that drive, it definitely is going to be a blast. It's going to handle way better, way easier to actually get around the tighter courses and some of the faster stuff too. Here's the actual side-by-side comparison of the two. So on the left you have the old one, which was about 3.5 turns lock to lock, and on the right you have the new one. So it's somewhere between 2 and 2.2 turns lock to lock. So it's definitely going to be a blast to go test this thing out one of these days and actually go to a rallycross event with it to see what kind of a difference it made in the tighter stuff. So if you like what you saw, let me know. Subscribe if you're not already. Like it, comment, dislike it. It's all good. Appreciate you guys watching my videos, and let me know what you want to see in the future. Thanks.